Okay, let's do this again. Good morning once again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome to another week of Introduction to Urban and Regional Planning. This week, we are going to have a presentation on urban planning by Group 2, followed by a complimentary session, a complimentary lecture from me. And then, hopefully, we have time for a brief discussion on public participation in planning. I see that group two is ready to present. I have already permitted screen sharing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Okay, right. So I will give the time and the floor to group two. We have a raised hand. Yes, Anand.
Sure. I ask your permission to off my camera because my internet connection is unstable.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
It can be start now, sir.
Yeah, sure. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, good morning, everyone. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Dias Rutumanda Murti. You can call me Dias, and my friend.
I'm Mbak Inazila Putri Kinanti.
Reza.
So in this presentation, we will discuss urban planning. Next, yeah. So the first slide is the definition of urban planning. Urban planning is the process that seeks to control the development of cities through local regulation and direct interventions to fulfill a number of objectives such as mobility, quality of life, and sustainability. Urban planning is concerned with the social, economic, environmental consequences of uniting spatial boundaries and influencing spatial distribution of resources. Next. Why cities need urban planning, or why urban planning is important. The reason number one is organize and plan development of cities. Of two, offer a better quality of life. Three, aids economic growth and economic development. Four, takes into account the environmental considerations. Five, make city resilient. Six, better infrastructure and sustainable form of development. Six, access to educational and health facilities. Eight, a good and efficient public transport system. Nine, an efficient and reliable waste management system. And the last one is more job and other economic opportunities. If an urban area is badly planned, it can be resident face traffic congestions, inadequate infrastructure, unaffordable housing, and are vulnerable to climate change, fire hazard, and flooding. The city and its infrastructure become unsustainable and ultimately hinder the growth and the population of economy. Next.
Next page saja. So this is the short story of urban planning. So urban planning emerged as a scholarly discipline in the 90s. In Great Britain, the first academic planning program began at the University of Liverpool in 1909, and the first North American program was established at Harvard University in 1924. Next, please.
this part is going to be explained by me, the types of urban planning. Before showing you examples of types of urban planning, I'm going to give you a brief explanation about what are the types. First of all, it is previously mentioned by Dias, the definition of urban planning and its goal to fulfill a number of objectives. Knowing so, urban planning will involve many elements such as social, uh, psychological aspect, and also well-being of the citizen and many more other aspects. So to fulfill that objective or goals, urban planners will need specified types of urban planning. And it is going to be an example in my next slide. The first one is land use planning. It is a type of urban planning that involves the creation of a policy and legislation pertaining to a piece of land. And the second one is an economic development. Is a necessary component of urban planning that works to identify a potential growth of a city from the economical aspect. And infrastructure planning is a branch of planning that involves various types of system and facilities that are necessary for a city or for its residents. The fourth one is environment planning. Environment planning is a field of work from urban planning that forms a strategic development that focuses primarily on sustainability and the ability of land to be able to carry the purpose of that the owner want to. And the fifth one is strategic planning or strategic plans. Strategic plans is a form of urban planning that centers around uh, a goal or a long span goal, whether it's for 20 or 30 years, where that it will be soon be achievable, where these high level goals and are also guided by uh, identifying the best areas of growth for a metropolitan cities. These goals can be focused on such as the quality of life of the citizens or encouraging people to move into the city and focus on community spaces where it will be useful for the citizens of the city. And from that five, there are still many more, but I won't include it because it's going to be too much to explain. And moving to the next slide, concepts. There are many types of concepts that we know. Maybe it have been previously presented by Mr. Prananda, that concepts such as Ebenezer Howard's social city, garden city by Letchworth, and also maybe that is quite recognizable is a neighborhood unit, for example, in New York City by Clarence Perry. These concepts are seen through history because of the purpose or the need of the planner to make a concept or to fulfill a certain goal. And moving on into the next slide, from the goals that have been previously seen in history, we can refer back to the beginning or origin of urban planning. Urban planning wasn't a particular job or task that a city usually have one designated person to do. That's why it involves philosophy and politics. But this role of a planner is usually filled by an engineer, whether is it building engineer or a road engineer that focus on the task. And moving into the next one, social science. Social science started to be incorporated to the concept of urban planning because after the 1960s, the educational aspect of urban planning or the teaching of urban planning started to make movement, whether is it in college or in other parts of work. It involves economics, sociology, and psychology. And sustainability, which is a concept that is quite recently brought to daylight in the around 1900s, is involving about environment and economical aspects of urban planning, where it takes consideration whether the city could sustain its lifespan through because of the environment, whether the environment could bear the city and carry the city, and also whether the city could economically support the citizen. And the next slide will be continued by Nazila.
Okay, so now we're talking about the issues and the solutions. Next, please. So the first problem is the problem of growing population growth. Population problem is the imbalance between population, resources, and services, which is the increase in the population without increasing opportunities for education, sanitation, employment, and the high level of economy. There are general problems that occur because the increase in population, which is traffic congestion, resulting in an increase in the number of cars and pollution of the environment. There is also an increase in overcrowding occurring in schools and hospitals, which affects the quality of education and health together. The increasing population has made it difficult to dispose of and recycle waste. In order to overcome this problem, we must begin with the individual in terms of education, issuing family planning laws, and ensuring education. Next, please. The second is the problem of population concentration. Next, please. This is where a number of people move to a certain area of the land after leaving their homes in the rural places for work or to live. This has become a problem, causing a negative impact on the rural populations due to the shortage of surface and labor. It has also been a problem for the urban population in increasing the number of labor, which lead to unemployment. To help solve this problem, we must prevent the displacement of villages to cities as well as be providing all services to the villages and rural areas, attention to education and help in those areas. Next, please. The third is the problem of slums. In addition to high population density, the informal housing areas pose great dangers to the population and society in general. Some of the most important dangers are, first is unemployment and hidden economies due to poverty and lack of skills among many slums residents. The second is violence and crime. The widespread poverty in the societies, unemployment, the inability to move forward, and the partial or total absence of law push many into absence of law. Push many into violence or engage in organized crime. And last but not least is disease and epidemics. The absence of health components lead to the spread of disease among the big population, which makes transmission and outbreaks of epidemics easily possible. In order to overcome this problem, the government has to provide health and safety housing and facilities for all workers in factories and low-income people, raise wages and improve services. Next, please.
The fourth one is the problem of displacement. Next. According to the United Nations Center for Human Settlement, strategy for combating displacement, homelessness is defined as a lack of adequate housing, which include all situations and conditions considered below the appropriate level in the society where the displaced person live. The homeless are in a tragic situation where men, women, and children live in trailers, abandoned houses, and streets. The homeless people are threatened all the time, especially in the rainy season or in the winter. But they are at greater risk, such as health, mental, and physical problems. Some shelter offer service to help people get a home, helping individuals, for example, receive state subsidies, financial assistance from other sources, or legal aid. Help them to get support to repair their relationship with their families or to have opportunities to learn some skill. The solution to this homelessness problem is good urban planning, and the government has to provide funding for the establishment of shelter to meet the needs of displaced person. Next.
The fifth issue is going to be present by me is the problem of education. Education is very important for any civilized society. It is the main manufacturer of civilization. People with good enough education live in the cities, while those living in the slums suffers from economic problems. Therefore, no educational opportunity and lack of chance to grow their potential. The solution to provide a good education for all individuals is to establish a fair geographical distribution of schools and universities in all regions. And that is from me. And that is all from us. Thank you for your attention and also for the time. Back to you, Mr. Prananda. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Group Two. It's a lot to digest, really. You've delivered you've delivered a presentation on the definitions and the evolution of the discipline, and then you ended nicely with a short review of the issues. So basically any form of planning, whether it is urban, regional, or in a more localized scale, the basic premise, the basic idea of planning is to create better spaces for living. In the end, ultimately leading to a better life for the citizens of that particular place. I think you missed one pillar when you mentioned sustainability in one of your slides. You said environmental and economical. You mentioned the environmental and the economical pillars, but you forgot to mention one other pillar, which is the social pillar. So sustainability, sustainable development is supported by three pillars: social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economical sustainability. You also mentioned population growth and distribution, and yes, it is an issue not so much the population growth, but more to the population distribution. Why is that so? Well, in the urbanization process, there is something. There's a factor. There are two factors. Sorry, that we often mention: the push and pull factor. The push factor comes from areas outside the city. The pull factor comes from the city itself. So push factor from the villages, for example, maybe limited services, limited opportunities, as you already said. The pull factors are better services, better opportunities in cities. Now, the issues with homelessness, slums, and other social, environmental, and economical issues associated with those generally start with people coming to the city, people migrating to the city with very limited skills, and that is the result of a lack of basic services such as education. And once they get to the city, they have no social support network whatsoever. Maybe so they come there, they don't know anyone there, they don't know where to start, and thus contributing to the typical urban issues. Last week I shared a link with you to an article about genetics and our capacity to go further in education. The article is a bit rooted in eugenics, but what you mentioned here goes to show that it is more of nurture versus nature. But anyways, that is my summary of your presentation. I would like to invite other members of the class to comment, or perhaps even deliver a question or two to the presenting group. Anyone? If not, then if no one is going to ask or give us any comments for now, then I'd like to once again thank Group 2 for presenting their findings to the class. And don't forget to upload your slides to our classroom. Okay, virtual applause for you guys, and allow me to begin my complimentary my lecture to complement the group's presentation today. So, for those of you who are late to join, please please mark your attendance by scanning the QR code that you see before you. And you've already mentioned the definition of urban planning, the purpose of urban planning, and such. But definition and purpose can only go so far if you don't sort of fulfill certain criteria. So what I'll add to your presentation today are three major points. So, well, actually two major points. First is the three qualities in urban space, and then the planning context in the planning context in Indonesia. And then hopefully if we have time, which looking at the clock right now, I think we should have enough time. Then we'll continue with a class discussion on an issue that I built or that I an issue that I mirrored from the presenting group. So I know this is not urban planning, but this is what Professor Muhammad Daniswara has to say about the ideal city. Through urban design, a city must fulfill three qualities: functional, visual, and environmental quality. And what he meant by the three qualities are as follows. So functionally, there are five subdivisions or subplots: linkages, integration. An urban space, a quality urban space, should be orderly, teratur. They should be effective and efficient. Linkages. A quality urban space or a quality city or good city, the ideal city, they have strong linkages between one function or one activity to another, and they also have very strong linkages to the surrounding supporting areas. Integration. What he meant by integration was the integration of services, such as health, education, and governmental services and whatnot. They all should be integrated to form an orderly structure, whether it be a tangible, structural, physical structure, or an intangible structure such as rules and regulations, which then creates an effective governance and the efficient running or the efficient functioning of the city day to day. Visually, the ideal city would be legible. Legible, if for any of you who don't know what legible means clear. Legibility is clarity. Jelas. I think the basic the root word in our language would be jelas, kejelasan. Why should it? Why? What did he mean by kejelasan or legibility? Well, the ideal city would be easy to read, as in when you move from one part of the city to another part of the city, you can sense the changes. You can sense what each section of the city is for. Central business district, the suburbs, the connecting or the middle space between the central business district and the suburb, and perhaps there are even other developmental hubs that once you get there, you know that you're there. For example, how do you know that you're in Jakarta? What is the first indicator? If you're traveling from outside of Jakarta, what is the first indication that you are actually in Jakarta? And don't say airport or seaport or the train station. But when you leave the airport, when you leave the train station, when you leave the bus station, what is the first indicator that you are in Jakarta or you are in a part of Jakarta? Anybody from Jakarta here? Yes.
Hello, sir. I'm from Jakarta, and what I notice is when you go out of the part of the city, there's a border. There's a mark that says that you're leaving DKI Jakarta and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. what I was referring to with legibility is not the visual cues, not the nameplates. That's why I said don't mention airports and train stations and such. Yes, I forgot to say I forgot to mention that when you drive to and from an area, you do have the you do have the you do have a physical sign that says you are leaving such and such. For example, is there a particular landmark? Is there a particular landmark that says that you're in Jakarta or you're in Surabaya now? Monas, for example, that's a good indicator that yes, you are in Jakarta. Or Tugu Pahlawan, the Monument of Heroes, yes. When I see this, I know that I'm actually in Surabaya, or I'm in the heart of the city. I'm in the heart of Surabaya. Or maybe if you don't have large visual cues such as that, you may look at a street and know, or this street is Jenderal Sudirman, for example, or this street is so and so, because of the atmosphere, because of the colors of the building, because of the facade of the building, because of the streets, because of sights and sounds. That sort of legibility, kejelasan itu yang dimaksud. That sort of legibility is what Professor Daniswara meant. Beauty, obviously, the ideal city would be beautiful. If it were gray and drab, it wouldn't be ideal. It would be depressing. Character. The two last points, character and identity, they're actually very strongly tied. They're strongly connected. Because character builds identity. So, but character is something that is a little bit more intangible. It could mean the character. It could mean the people's character. People there are friendly, or people there are nasty, and so on. And that builds the overall identity of the city. Or this is a very friendly city. This is a very harsh city. And this is a very open city, open-minded, open, and so on. And then we have the environmental qualities. Of course, we have to be mindful of the climate. And climate is a given factor. We can only do so much to modify the climate. For example, as much as I'd like it to be, but I can't expect snow to fall in Surabaya. I think only until hell freezes over, then Surabaya will snow, or Indonesia will snow completely. And then there's the ecological balance. You have to maintain some sort of ecological balance. The ideal city maintains the ecological balance between the natural space and the built area. And then, of course, you have the human aspect to it, which is the sociocultural aspect. A quality urban space, or the ideal city, would be a place that is welcome to all, regardless of your ethnical or educational or whatever background. So, and the sociocultural diversity to the ideal city actually lends to the city's strength. So that's his idea of the ideal urban space, or the ideal city. Last week I gave you a glimpse of this slide structure. The regional planning group, with the provincial or even national spatial plan. Urban, in that you translate the provincial and the national plans into urban Kabupaten Regency, or the Regency or the urban plans. And these two documents will then be further translated, further detailed into the detailed spatial plans. And to go further than that, then in the urban scale, we have at least two general categories of plans. So we have the spatial plan, peraturan penataan ruang, the spatial plans, and then we also have the building and environmental plans. From these spatial plans, a portion of it will be translated into the regional regulations or the city regulations for buildings, and that particular regulation details or dictates how a building should look, not in the sense that it should have this color, it should have this sort of building material. No, but how far is it? How far is a setback from the street? How tall should the building be? How far apart should one building be from another? So setbacks between buildings and such. And then, of course, Perda Bangunan Gedung also regulates the sort of it also regulates the safety standards the buildings should have, evacuation routes, fire prevention or fire response utilities, and so on and so forth. This regulation is then translated further into the RTBL, or Rencana Tata Bangunan dan Lingkungan. It is also known as PRK, Peraturan Rancang Kota, and these two planning documents are usually translated or legalized into the mayor's decree or mayor's regulation, or maybe the regent's decree. Bupati, Peraturan Bupati, Regent's Decree, or Regent's then make up the basis for the building permit, izin mendirikan bangunan. So that's a simplified diagram of how of the regulation or the legal framework or legal hierarchy from spatial plans down from a more macro or meso scale spatial plan to a much more micro scale, right down to the permits for each plot of land. So until up to here, does anybody have any comments or questions? If not, then I'll go on, because just keep this hierarchy in mind, because this is what you will be. I'm sure the hierarchy might shift a little. It might shift a little, but not so much so. And you will be dealing with this hierarchy throughout your academic and subsequently your professional careers. But that's the legal context. When we talk about urban planning, it's not just about the legal framework. It's not just about the approaches to planning, but to go further into the context of planning, we have to keep in mind that this I would say is our country's uniqueness. So the face of our city is full of contrasts, and these contrasts are marked clearly by sociocultural or economic dualism, and these contrasts and dualism, they manifest themselves. They manifest tangibly or physically, and intangibly or non-physically. Most of the times, within any given city or within any given urban space, whatever kota, whatever kabupaten, there are two socio-economic societies who exist whose existence seem to contain conflict. Sorry, seem to contain conflict, but in reality they coexist. The two major groups that I mentioned, that I gave a hint to, refers to the societal gap that we have within our urban environment. First of all, we are a nation of many cultures, obviously, and this is something that you've learned ever since you were very, very young, ever since we were very, very young. From the furthest eastern tip of our country to the furthest west, I think we have over 700. I think we have easily over 700 languages and dialects, and that is a staggering amount. I think over 700 or more. I'm not. I don't quite remember, but that is a staggering amount of languages, and I've tried to locate, or I've tried to search for a much better illustration of our diversity, rather than the typical traditional clothing, dance, and artwork. I was trying to capture our diversity in a different light, but time didn't allow me to do so. So please excuse me for that. But this diversity is then comes together within pockets in our country, small pockets that we call cities. So cities are our melting pots, a melting pot of culture, melting pot of social norms and social values, and thus giving our urban environments a much richer experience, or a much richer feel. But sir, isn't that typical to any other city, you might say? Well, big cities, yes, but in smaller cities, smaller towns, not so much. So. For touristy areas, say Yogyakarta or Bali, then you can feel this diversity, or mix from. You can feel the diversity not only within our country, but also diversity from other places, from other countries as well. But if you talk about if you go to much smaller cities, say for example, I don't know, Sidoarjo, Gresik. In my opinion, those two regencies and those two cities are more homogeneous, in that most people are from there. They've lived their whole lives there, and so on. So bigger cities are melting pots. The smaller cities are not so much so. There is a city called Airlie Beach, in northern Queensland in Australia, where the citizens are pretty much homogenous. The demographic is very much homogenous. White people, mostly. Even if you do get backpackers, then it's pretty much local backpackers and such. So that's just an illustration of, because that's a very small city. But if you go to the bigger cities, you go to Sydney, you go to Brisbane, you go to Adelaide, then you have a good mix of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, much like the big cities in our place. Jakarta, mixed ethnics. Surabaya, mixed ethnics, and so on. And then we have, this is the contrast, moving to the contrast bit, we have this disparity that we have to be mindful of. The last time I checked, which was very recently, we have a Gini index of about 39 or so. And on a scale of on a scale of 0 to 100, where zero is total equity, total equality, and 100 is absolute disparity, then we're almost in the middle. We're actually pretty high, 39. We have reached a Gini index, or a disparity index, of 40, and now we are trying to bridge that gap. And so, what does this mean? And so, what does this mean? This means that the stereotypical sayings like si kaya dan si miskin, the rich and the poor, exist right in front of us in our cities, and it manifests itself. It manifests itself physically like this, where we have grand buildings, we have large modern development. Behind them all, we have dense urban settlements, which generally, not always, but which generally cater for the poorer, for the poor. This is Surabaya's Tunjungan quarter, or Tunjungan block. This is where everything is happening. Just here, apartments and the like, office blocks, and then along the main road, you have predominantly commercial activities. Again, a smaller scale commercial activity on this road here as well. And these commercial activities surround these dense urban settlements, which, as I mentioned, is a portrait of our city's duality, or dualism. And it seems like it's a contrast, it's a conflicting thing. However, if we think about it, these poor, the more actually support the more that envelope the block. A lot of the times, the people the employees, the staff that work in Tunjungan Plaza, they can't afford to eat in the food court every day, can they? So for their daily meals, they would go and find food, and perhaps even shelter or accommodation within these kampungs. So the kampungs, or the poorer settlements, actually support the formal and the more affluent part, or the more affluent part of the more affluent functions of the city. Another typical view. This is a more aerial view, not of Surabaya, but I think you get the idea. And if you go further, and if you're willing to go deeper and observe life between the buildings. Oh, actually, I should give you that. I should give you a copy of that book, Life Between Buildings, by Jan Gill. But life between these tall towers and these massive concrete blocks is a whole lot different. It's very, very different. I think a friend of mine, I might have told you this, but a friend of mine came not to Surabaya but to Jakarta once, and he said, when you get off the airport, when you get out of the airport, you take the bus or you drive to the city center. Sorry, to the city center, and you can see these magnificent buildings that show that Jakarta is a very modern day 21st century city. He said 21st century city. Very impressive, very magnificent. But if you look beyond the buildings, then it's actually not much difference. Sorry. It's actually not much different to Dhaka in Bangladesh, where it's very dense. It's full of slums and so on, dirty and it's overpopulated, overcrowded, and such. However, he says once again that you do get a sense that these two layers of society coexist, and they coexist, and in a way, they need each other to survive. For example, if it weren't for the poor, if it weren't for the poor, who's going to clean the toilets in these hotels and plazas? If it weren't for the poor, who sorry, if it weren't for the poor, who will um, who will assist your parents if you do have if you do have household assistants? Who will assist your parents in the day-to-day operations of your house, of the household? If it weren't for the poor, who will provide affordable provide affordable services, not only affordable services that cater not only to the poor, but to all layers of society. So the rich make sure that the city is functioning, and the poor support the rich in doing so. Not an ideal illustration, but that's what I have for now. So coming to that, almost 1 billion people worldwide live in such conditions, or informal communities and slums. And when we talk about the slums, like this one here, when we talk about the slums, slum settlements often have no basic infrastructure whatsoever. They don't have clean water. They don't have toilets. They don't even have adequate roads. And in some cases, because they don't have basic infrastructure, they don't have basic utilities, life in these slums can actually be more expensive than living in formal settlements. Why? They have to buy water. They have to buy water to drink. They have to buy water to wash. They have to buy water to bathe, and so on. That's one thing. Electricity. They may steal electricity from the grid, from the power network, but only one or two parties would steal, and then they distribute the electricity to the people, and often that comes with a price as well. So I'd like you to think about these 3 questions. What do you think of these communities? What do you think of the poor communities? Or what do you think of the contrasting environments in our major cities? Not only Surabaya, not only Jakarta, but I think most major cities, if not all major cities in our country, or in Southeast Asia, to be more specific, to be more general, have this sort of contrast and dualism. So what do you think of these communities? Can you think of examples of simple, perhaps even common sense solution that would work for them? How would you provide utilities? How would you provide adequate housing for them? And actually, this should be the last question. What do you think? What do you think would happen if we involve the poor in city planning? Anyone? I am asking you now, what do you think of these? Yes, Indira.
Allow me to answer, sir. In my opinion, I think that it's very unfair for these communities to experience such inequality, such a big difference between communities, especially in those big cities, as you mentioned before, where you can clearly see the wide gaps in between like infrastructure and how the communities develop in an area. And I think it would be a great idea if the poor were part of city planning, not exactly part of city planning, but contribute ideas into city planning, just like that when this idea of urban planning that you once introduced to us in the first week, if I'm not mistaken, it's the psychogeography theory, if I'm not mistaken, and sort of solutions that would work for them. Again, it always comes back to better planning, better infrastructure, and finding a way on how to reduce the gap in between these communities and the city. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else, does everyone agree or does anyone disagree with what Indira has mentioned? I might have to add that most of the times, I think the injustice that that these people experience is not just limited to the lack of basic services and infrastructure, but a lot of the times, they get marginalized and even displaced. They even get displaced in the name of development, in the name of better, in the name of more, in the name of better cities, or in the name of development. Most of the times they get sidelined, and and displaced. I can recommend a book for you all to read. I might have mentioned this before, but it's called this by Miss Van Voorst. I think if I'm not I think I spelled her name correctly. It's about an anthropologist who spent some time living among slum dwellers in Jakarta. The book is originally in Dutch, but has been translated into Indonesian. It's a very good read. It's an eye opener, at least for me. It's an eye opener as to how these people cope with providing basic infrastructure and services, and even and how they have this informal social structure in place. Informal structure in place. They have they even have an informal bank. So there's a financial institution in there, and so on. So a lot of things that you can learn from her experience. Anybody else would like to add to what Indira said? You don't even have to put your hand up. You can just unmute yourself and start. Yes.
also. Yeah, in my opinion, I agree with Indira's opinion. It's just very unfortunate that in big cities, the disparity between the poor and the rich is it's sudah kelihatan banget gitu. Jadi and I think the poor are always a part of city planning because if you want to plan a city, you pasti mikirin semuanya lah gitu. Tapi for example, I read few weeks ago that when the 2016 Olympics in Rio, that the poor people were dipindahkan karena to provide the necessary infrastructure for the Olympics, and it caused major backlash with the government. So the government has to take a solution with providing them a better housing project, housing infrastructure, and then I think they should have equal opportunities as the other people. So yeah, I think that's my opinion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, that is exactly what I meant by them being sidelined and even pushed and even displaced in the name of development. And not Tokyo Olympics. That was just that just happened yesterday. But the Rio Olympics, where they plan to remove or bulldoze several poor settlements. That didn't go well. That didn't go well with the citizens, of course, and this bulldozing approach, I think, is still very common in the global South here, in any other developing nations. We do have, for example, I think in China, where the government has absolute power over the citizens. They do have a very strict or a very top-down approach to building and planning and building. So a lot of communities can be wiped out overnight to pave way or to make way for a new road, for example. I think this is an issue everywhere, I reckon, and it is once. You said that udah kelihatan jelas banget. The contrast is very clear, and sadly, I don't think this contrast is going to go away anytime soon. We can bridge the gap a little bit by bit, but I think for a poor family, it would take them 3 or 4 generations to come out of poverty. That's quite a long time, and during that time, a lot of things can happen. Maybe and people living in informal settlements, the formal kampungs, the kampungs that are recognized by the city and the city planning documents and such, not a problem. But but other informal settlements. A lot of the times, people wake up in the morning, they go to work, and then when they come home, their house is already gone because of development. So I don't think there is any way. I don't think there is any way that we can't find a solution to every. We can't find a solution. I think, or planners have a certain capacity, have a certain technical capacity, and may not be able to find a solution to every single individual living in the poor slum areas. But the most decent thing we can do, is make their lives a little bit more comfortable. For example, this was taken. These pictures were taken taken from Kampung Danukusuman in Solo. I took these pictures in June 2013, and the oh god, I forgot his name, but he's from. He is one of the founders, or one of the founding fathers, or the initiators of Solo Kota Kita, if I'm not mistaken, or is it Kotaku, Kota Tanpa Kumuh. He's an activist for sure, and he's been advocating for these old slum settlements, and the people that live in it, and throughout his efforts, he said, look, these people only need basic services. At least we the least we can do is provide them with basic services so that they can live healthier lives. And when they live healthier lives, when they live better lives, then subsequently they will have it will lead them, it will help them find better opportunities and such. And so he went on a quest of several years to provide clean water for the people in, not only in Danukusuman but also in other slum settlements. Toilets. I know this one is that's it. This one has there's a well there, and there's a well in front of the shared bathroom. Clean water, a place for them to relieve themselves and bathe and clean, and he not just him single-handedly, of course, but with the help of the local residents, they actually managed to come together and plan their settlement in a way that in a way that they secured they can actually, the open area here was not there before. It was jam-packed full of houses, with very narrow alleys and very narrow gaps between them. But they managed to shuffle around somehow. They managed to shuffle around some houses. They did not drive people away from the settlement. They just rearranged the houses to provide an open space where people can play badminton, or they can also hang out their laundry. But they can play badminton. They can gather around. And watch the World Cup together or whatnot. So it becomes this open space. And so this dude was once lived in slum settlements, and he mentioned that even the smallest changes, such as providing basic infrastructure, these pathways are paved now. Before that, it was just dirt. So you can imagine how this place would look when it rains, and it floods there as well. Because I should have put the other picture here. And it floods there as well because because Danukusuman happens to be right next to a canal. And when it rains, the canal gets filled up pretty quickly, and it becomes unpleasant. but they managed. But they managed somehow, not just in providing clean water and basic utilities, but also drainage. And they and the people in his organization educated the slum dwellers to manage their waste, so waste management and all that. So basic services, education, you give them that, you empower them with that, and they can go a long way. And as I said, you can't make them billionaires overnight. You can't make them billionaires, of course. And most of the times, the formal planning system don't work with these people because they are so used to the informal structures. So we have to be able to work as a future planner. You guys would have to be able to work with both the formal structures and the informal structures of our society, because that sort of dualism, that sort of contrast, that sort of thing exists in our urban environment and in our planning landscape. I think that's what makes us unique, and yeah, I don't think these are time soon. And to be honest, to be frank, I don't think kampungs should go away at all. I think kampungs should always be there. Should always be there, as long as they are clean, healthy, and they can provide opportunities for the people that live in them. I have added three references that can that you can read. It does have developing developing country aura to it. So FIDA, Urban Planning Challenges in Developing Countries, and Rama Subramanian and Albrecht, Planning Challenges and the Challenges of Planning, and and number 3, Watson, The Planned City Sweeps the Poor Away. That is gold. She posits that, as I mentioned earlier, the formal system actually drives the informal drives the informality away, and since the informality is mostly poor, then that's what that's what she meant. Oh, I forgot to mention. There is also a video that there is also a link to a video that I posted in Classroom that will be available after class. I think you can access that link after 12 p.m. That also talks about empowering the poor and involving them. And involving them in the planning process. So. So far, any comments or any questions from the class? Richard?
Yes, thank you for the. I actually have a question for you. In your presentation, you've mentioned about our different cultures in Indonesia. So I was wondering if maybe one day we become an urban planner. Do we have to consider that when we're planning a city, do we have to consider the different cultures? For example, maybe in Toraja there is still some rumah adat that we have to yang selalu harus dilestarikan, something like that.
Very good question. Thank you. for that. I'm glad you asked. Different cultures, different values, different norms, different habits. Yes, we do have, and do we have to cater for them all? Well, we have to first of all we have to acknowledge these differences in planning, more so in the micro level, because that's where all the action is happening. That's where the action and the potential friction can happen. Do we have to accommodate them in the way that in the sense that we have to provide a special place for them? For example, that's how the Dutch planned our cities. They have Kampung Arab, and then they have Chinatown, and so on. They segregated people by race because it's easier for them to control. But do we have to do that now? No. Why would we? We don't because we don't need to provide a special kampung or a special settlement for Maduris, or a special settlement for people from Toraja or whatnot. That's my opinion on it. Because people congregate anyways. People from the same background, they come together anyways. So we don't have to provide a specific place for them, but let these agglomerations and let these things happen naturally. As for heritage, cagar budaya, that we have to maintain, harus kita lestarikan. Yes, absolutely. Things like rumah adat, it is becoming or traditional houses. I prefer the term rumah adat actually. Rumah adat, I would argue, is a dying breed. Not and when I meant and what I mean by rumah adat is not only the shape of it, but if you want to preserve a rumah adat, you have to preserve the building materials, you have to preserve the building techniques, because if you're only going to take a shape, for example, rumah gadang, but you make it completely out of steel and glass and concrete, I wouldn't call that a rumah gadang. I would call that a rumah gadang wannabe. So if you're going to preserve rumah adat, you have to preserve not only the way it looks, but also the materials, the building techniques, the values and the norms that it symbolizes. That's what you need to preserve. And in planning, how can you do that? Well, there are a lot of mechanisms, banyak caranya, a lot of mechanisms, through building regulations, through zoning regulations. You can conserve a plot of land or an area of the city. But then the question is, why? Why do you want to preserve them? Why do you want to keep them? Because, let's go back to this. Because of number 3 and number 4, character and identity. It's a visual thing. It's a visual thing. It's part of your identity. It's part of my identity. It's part of our collective identity as a nation. But as an ethnic group, then it would have a more significant value to the certain ethnic group, for example. One funny example of identity is our accent when we speak a foreign language. Um, do we have to get rid of it? No, because it is part of our identity. Um, and for example, I met a lady from from East Java in Frankfurt International Airport. How do I know that she's from East Java? She looks like she looks like she could be from Philippines, from Thailand, or Vietnam, because we all look like that. But then she spoke in German with a very thick East Javan accent, medok, sangat medok. Um, when she spoke, she said to her husband, "Would you like a burger or salad?" And in German, she said it like this, and she said it precisely like this: "Schatzi, willst du Burger oder Salat?" I thought, East Java. That's part of our identity, and we carry that everywhere. And you know, in Italy, I met another Indonesian traveler in Italy simply because my friend. Um, my friend said out loud, "Gue lapar." So just a couple of seats behind us, this lady popped up and said, "Hey, orang Indonesia ya?" And that's how. So language, accent, visual identities, traditional houses, um, even the parts of history that we don't want to keep, it is good for us to keep. And which part of history is that? Colonial buildings, for example. For me personally, I think that colonial buildings are a reminder of a dark time, a reminder of when our people were colonized and experiencing injustice for over 200 for over 3 centuries. I think we should just get rid of them, bulldoze them, and replace them with something. Replace them with something else. Replace them with something that resembles our own identity. But however, you can also look at it this way. You need to preserve those old colonial buildings. Why? Because it reminded us that there was a time when we were not united. There was a time when we were invaded, when we were colonized, and we don't want to go back there again. It serves as a visual reminder. It becomes part of our character. It becomes part of our identity. We become united. We are united as a nation because of those damn buildings. Or not the buildings, but because of the people that built those buildings. The buildings are not at fault. So yes, we do have to consider different social values, different social norms in our city. How do we do that? We get as many people involved in the planning process as possible. And as for heritage, you will learn more about heritage as you progress through your academic career. I like to say academic career in our department, and even more so when you you will learn about heritage from I think from the best of our staff. Well, that's because yeah, Bukarin knows best about heritage. I'm not the one to speak about heritage, but in general, that's what I think heritage should be. It serves as a reminder. It's part of our identity. It's part of our character. I hope my long drawn answer satisfies your question, Richard.
Yes, thank you for the answer, sir.
No worries. Anyone else have any comments? No. Well then, I'd like to remind you again to check out the reference folder and do watch the video. It's a TED Talk, only about 15 minutes long or so. And it's really good. It's about empowering the poor and how solutions, practical solutions, can actually come from the poor, and you can't begin to imagine the sort of innovation that you can come up with when you talk. When you talk with these people and when you get them involved in the development process. Last but not least, last but not least, keep in mind, next time, every time someone says, every time someone says development planning, if anyone says development planning, ask yourself or ask themselves this: development for who? Development for the poor or development for who? For whom is this development? Ask themselves this. And anytime you get involved in a development planning project, ask yourself that as well. Who is this development for? It'll go a long way. Thank you everyone for joining me this morning. Thank you Group 2 for that wonderful presentation, and I look forward to our next meeting with Group 3 presenting. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.